Wait. Say that again, how did you solve it? The room fell silent. The CEO's confident smirk vanished, replaced by something no one had ever seen before, uncertainty. Across the polished glass table stood a man no one had bothered to notice just minutes earlier, the janitor. Before we dive into this unforgettable story, take a second, hit like, subscribe, and stay with me till the end. Because what you're about to hear isn't just a story, it might change the way you see people forever. The morning had started like any other at Orion Tech, a company known for innovation, prestige, and a culture that quietly separated the important from the invisible. Executives rushed through hallways, assistants balanced schedules, and somewhere in the background, a quiet man in a faded uniform swept the floors with steady, unhurried movements. His name was Daniel. Most people didn't know that. To them, he was just the janitor. The one who emptied bins, wiped coffee spills, and nodded politely without expecting a reply. But Daniel noticed everything. He noticed how people spoke when they thought no one important was listening. He noticed who said, "Thank you," and who didn't. And most of all, he noticed patterns in numbers, in conversations, in problems left unresolved on whiteboards long after meetings ended. Daniel hadn't always been a janitor. Years ago, he had been something else entirely. But life doesn't always follow the path we plan. A failed startup, a sick parent, debts that piled up like storm clouds, one decision after another had led him here. Yet one thing had never left him, his mind. That morning, the company buzzed with unusual energy. The CEO himself, Adrian Cole, had called for an all-hands executive meeting. Adrian was known for his brilliance and his ego. He thrived on challenges and loved reminding others that he was always the smartest person in the room. In the conference room, a large digital screen displayed a complex problem. It was an algorithmic puzzle tied to a new product launch, a problem that had stalled the company's progress for weeks. Executives whispered among themselves. Engineers scribbled notes. No one had solved it. Adrian leaned back in his chair, a faint smile playing on his lips. "So," he said, tapping the screen, "we've spent weeks on this. Millions of dollars on research. And yet," he paused, letting the silence stretch. "Nothing." No one dared respond. Then, with a casual chuckle, he added, "Tell you what, if anyone in this building can solve it today, I'll personally reward them." He smirked. "Heck, solve it right now, and I'll give you a kiss." The room erupted in awkward laughter. It was the kind of joke that reinforced hierarchy, the kind that said, "This is impossible. Don't even try." Outside the glass walls, Daniel paused mid-sweep. He glanced at the screen. His eyes narrowed slightly. He stepped closer. Inside, the team continued debating, throwing around complicated theories that led nowhere. Frustration grew thicker by the minute. And then, a quiet knock. At first, no one paid attention. Adrian didn't even look up. The knock came again. Irritated, one of the managers opened the door. "What is it?" Daniel stood there, holding his cleaning cart. "Sorry," he said softly. "I didn't mean to interrupt, but I think there's a mistake in the second assumption." The manager blinked, confused. "What?" Daniel hesitated. "The problem on the screen. The constraint, it assumes a linear progression, but it's actually recursive." Inside the room, a few people turned. Adrian finally looked up, eyebrows raised in amusement. "Come in," he said, leaning forward with interest. "This should be entertaining." Daniel stepped inside, clearly out of place among suits and ties. Some people smirked. Others exchanged glances. Adrian gestured toward the screen. "Go on, enlighten us." Daniel swallowed. For a moment, it looked like he might back out. But then he took a breath, walked to the board, and picked up a marker. As he began explaining, something shifted. His voice grew steadier, his movements more confident. He pointed out flaws no one had noticed. Simplified steps that had been unnecessarily complicated. Reframed the entire problem in a way that made it elegant. At first, there were whispers. Then silence. Complete silence. Within minutes, Daniel reached the final step, wrote down the solution, and stepped back. "There," he said quietly. "That should work." No one spoke. Adrian stared at the board. His smile was gone. He stood up slowly, walked closer, and examined every line. His expression changed, from skepticism, to curiosity, to disbelief. "Wait," he muttered. "Say that again. How did you solve it?" Daniel repeated the key step. Adrian froze. Because it was correct. Not just correct, brilliant. The kind of solution that didn't just answer the question, but revealed a deeper understanding of the entire system. The room erupted, not in laughter this time, but in stunned murmurs. One of the engineers whispered, that's it. That actually works." Another said, "How did we miss that?" Adrian turned to Daniel, his voice quieter now. "What's your name?" "Daniel," he replied. "And how exactly does a janitor," Adrian paused, choosing his words carefully, "come up with something like this?" Daniel shrugged slightly. "I studied similar problems years ago. I still practice. It helps me think." The simplicity of his answer hit harder than any explanation could. Years ago, still practice. While others had access to resources, teams, and time, Daniel had only had moments, stolen glimpses between tasks, late nights, and a mind that refused to stop learning. Adrian looked around the room. For the first time, he seemed unsure of himself. Then, slowly, he smiled, not the arrogant smirk from before, but something more genuine. "Well," he said, "I believe I made a promise." The room chuckled nervously. Daniel looked embarrassed. "That's not necessary." But Adrian shook his head. "You solved a problem my entire team couldn't. I owe you more than a joke." He extended his hand instead. Daniel hesitated, then shook it. And in that moment, something shifted, not just for Daniel, but for everyone watching. Over the next few weeks, everything changed. Daniel was offered a position, not out of pity, but out of respect. At first, he declined. He wasn't sure he belonged in that world anymore. But Adrian insisted. "Talent doesn't care about titles," he said. "And neither should we." Daniel eventually accepted. It wasn't easy. He faced doubt, whispers, and the weight of proving himself all over again. But this time, he wasn't invisible. And little by little, people began to see him, not as the janitor who got lucky, but as the mind they had overlooked. Months later, Orion Tech launched its product successfully. The algorithm Daniel had solved became a cornerstone of its success. At the launch event, Adrian stood on stage, addressing a crowd of investors and employees. He paused before finishing his speech. "There's something I learned recently," he said. "The biggest mistake we make isn't failing to solve problems, it's failing to see the people who can." He looked toward the front row, where Daniel sat. "Sometimes, the person you overlook is the one who changes everything." The audience applauded. Daniel didn't say much. He never did. But for the first time in years, he felt something he thought he had lost. Belonging. And maybe that was the real solution all along. So, next time you walk past someone, anyone, remember this story. Because brilliance doesn't always wear a suit. In respect, it should never depend on a title. If this story made you feel something, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs the reminder. You never know who's quietly solving the problems you haven't even noticed yet.